So hey guys, it is Charles from the channel Books on Serial, and we're so excited to be presenting you guys a new series where we just talk about everything about audiobooks. So we're going to have about 3 episodes talking about various audiobook topics. We're going to be ranging from why we love audiobooks to where to get audiobooks. And then we're all going to have a live show. Date will be announced once we get closer to the live show. Definitely stay tuned and make sure you subscribe to everyone and follow everyone on their social media links. They'll be all linked down in the description box down below. And yeah, so stay tuned. We have some really cool, exciting topics that we're going to be talking about. We have some really cool surprise giveaways that we're not going to tell you about right now. You have to watch all the episodes. We'll tease it out a little bit. But yes, so I will let everyone else go ahead and introduce themselves, and then we'll get started.
All right. Well, hi, I'm Shae. I'm hosting this particular discussion. So if you're new to my channel, I primarily talk about books and manga. I listen to a ton of audiobooks, and my husband almost primarily listens to audiobooks. So they're a big deal in our house.
Hi, my name is Nicole, and I'm from the channel Who Picked This Book, and I read predominantly romance, and I do listen to a lot of audiobooks as well.
I'm Jacqueline, and I am on the same page, and I also primarily read and listen to romance. I usually listen to audiobooks while I work, so I listen all the time.
Hi, I'm Laura from Laura's Library Card, and I read about 50% audiobooks and a lot of romance, but a couple other genres too. So I was excited to hop on in and talk about my love for audiobooks.
That is great. And it's surprising, Laura, that you have that specific statistic. Like, I don't even know how many audiobooks that I read versus I'm actually reading more, which is weird.
Yeah. Right? Every time Charles picks up a book and it's not an audiobook, I'm like, what's happening?
I blame Nicole. This is a side, but I blame Nicole for this. Like, I am hooked on Madison Faye. If you have read her, I just have like 20 books I just started by her. I'm just like, I can't stop.
They're like tips. Like, you can't just have one. You got to sit down and like go through like at least 5.
I will say this: 15 inches is a masterpiece.
The title alone is enough for me.
Honestly, I feel like it's a good indicator of the content.
If you're just looking at her, like, she's always over the top, straight to it. You know, she doesn't mess around.
She doesn't sugarcoat anything. Like, I know exactly what I'm getting from her, so I'm like, I'm happy with that. But getting back on topic, so why do you guys? Sorry, let's back up even further than that. So, what do you guys say when people say audiobooks aren't a form of reading? What do you guys feel about that?
Shut your ableist mouth. Sorry, I'm bad that way. Like, it's such an ableist thing to say that audiobooks aren't reading. Mm-hmm. I mean, think of a blind person. They don't necessarily want to sit and read Braille all the time. Audiobooks are a fantastic way for them to enjoy the whimsy of a series that might be harder through physically reading it for them. So, like, that's why I just tell them, shut your ableist mouth. Like, and enough of us are like busy or like anxious that just listening to an audiobook can help calm us down. I mean, like, I do it all the time. I have pretty severe anxiety, actually, so sometimes to where I can't sleep. So what I'll do is I'll pop in an audiobook so my brain is busy, and then just like color on my phone or something, or just do something small with my hands. And it just helps like relax all of me at the same time so I can actually get to sleep. So I just really am annoyed at people who are naughty about audiobooks and say that it's not reading, because it totally is. Rant done. Somebody else.
I'm so with you. Like, my mom can't read physical books anymore because it's like hard for her. She's like some issues with like her back and posture and stuff. So she like can't read physical books. So unless she like has this like special device for like holding up her e-reader, she kind of has to do, which is like sometimes the move, but not always. She has to do audiobooks. And so like in that case, like it just makes it like you said, it's so much more accessible for people who may not be able to. And like for me, I have ADHD. And so like my brain is kind of always spinning. And so it's really helpful when I'm working to kind of keep myself focused and on task, because if my brain is busy while I'm sketching or working on something on Illustrator, then I can just kind of keep going. So yeah.
Yeah, my mom is the same way. Like when you're saying like the posture and everything, like my mom cannot hold up a book, like even if it's just paperback, you know. So it's just usually when someone's like, oh, audiobook's not reading, I just like roll my eyes and I'm like, oh, are we still gatekeeping? You know, like seriously.
Right?
Yeah.
Gatekeeping thing. That's like people who say romance books aren't books. Like it's
Oh my goodness.
that's a discussion for another day.
That's a whole other video.
Don't get me started.
That's a whole other series we could go on, but
Exactly.
I mean,
There's nobody want us to talk about that.
yeah, let us know.
Seriously, like we could totally just like expand this and kind of do a spin-off leading into like other discussions. But yeah, it's like honestly with, you know, working and, you know, some people go to school, you know, and it's like if you just limit yourself to the time where you can actually just sit down, do nothing, and physically read a book, like you are seriously limiting yourself. Like, why would you do that? Like just in that standpoint, not necessarily like if you can't get a hold or, you know, reading physical books, but it's like I have probably more than doubled my reading just by including audiobooks while I am cleaning the house, while I'm shopping, while I'm commuting to work. It's like you're just getting all of that, you know, extra content, and it's fantastic. It's great.
Yeah. And I don't think anybody would argue that reading Braille is not a form of reading, but you're not physically using your eyeballs to read that. So like, what's the difference there? True. And even for something as simple as an auditory learner versus a visual learner, if you're trying, you know, how many people have to sit and listen to lectures who would prefer to read those lectures, or how many people record lectures and then play that back? So I feel like auditory stimulus is just a different form, and so therefore people who say it's not reading are just invalid, in my opinion.
You bring up a really good point, because like everybody learns differently, you know. Like some people would like to physically read it, some people like to listen to it, you know, and it's just like you're still learning or you're still consuming that content. Like it's just a different way of doing it.
Or another argument for like comics and graphic novels, some people need visually to see those kinds of things. So that, because, you know, not everybody's like brain and imagination works the same. A lot of people really struggle to fill in those gaps because we love to read. We love to be swept away by the authors. For a lot of people, that's a lot harder. So that's why visual, like behind me, is helpful. So they're still able to understand these beautiful stories, but in a form that is more easily accessible and understandable for them.
Yeah, that's completely true. Because I remember,
honestly, there are some of the graphics behind me that are just as like the big fantasy books that I read. So you can't say the graphics aren't dense, because they definitely are.
Yeah.
That reminds me of that whole Twitter fiasco where I think it was like imagine an apple or some type of description, and people couldn't actually visualize after reading it. It was like proven that some people have this ability versus others. Like for me, when I read a romance book, unless like the cover indicates like the ethnicities of the characters, I don't really pay attention to what the characters look like. I just like care about the dialogue. So if someone tells me like, oh, this character was like Asian, I'm like, oh, really?
You're like, I had no idea.
I was like, unless you make it like blatantly obvious in the description, I'm like, oh, I just thought like there was just like that culture was like being highlighted in the book.
And that's also why I think fan art is such a big thing in books, because some people can easily find that and then they channel their creativity in, you know, creating the fan art. But then those of us who sometimes struggle with descriptions, we can go look that up and see visual representations of these characters, internalize how they look to other readers. So
I might actually steal a point that Bree Hill made in our Voxer chat. Was that the way storytelling originally originated was through oral. It was like told persons, like that's where the fables and myths all come from.
Because like paper was so expensive and hard to come by for a really long time. So all of those older stories were like told and dictated verbally. So
yeah, most people couldn't read until that time. Until like so if you like wrote stuff down, no one would know how to read. So they all relied on, hey, just tell me the story. And I feel like audiobooks with like Audible and Libro FM and all those different companies, you see like that switch happening where more authors are going like, I have to put my book on audio, because there are a significant portion of readers who will not read their book unless there's an audio, which is me.
I actually know of an indie author that prioritizes their audio releases over even releases. So they get those done, and then they spend more time with the ebook editing it and stuff. and it's to the audiobook narrator because they get the audiobooks out first before they're getting ebooks or physical.
Yeah,
he got a really great narrator for his series, so that's why.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. I just feel like, especially compared to like reading times, an audiobook goes by much quicker than physically reading a book.
Yeah.
But sorry, Laura, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That depends.
No, that's fine. I did about 20 seconds of research, in preparation for this video. And there's some evidence that shows like in your brain, actually the neuroscience of reading physically with your eyeballs versus listening to a story is like equivalent. Like all of the same emotional areas of your brain light up. If you read the word father versus hear the word father, the same parts of the same people's brains light up. And so it's like, does it matter? Like if what format is, if that same emotional response is happening?
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
That's really interesting.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Something that I really enjoyed, I feel like, over the, please do. Something I found really interesting, particularly like in the last maybe 2-3 years, it's a lot more recent, but as audiobooks have become more and more popular, you'll get authors who are trying new things. I just listened to Call Me Maybe by Cara Bastone. Have you guys checked that out?
I heard of that one. Yeah. I know Shae
It was my first read of 2021. It was 5 stars. It's a perfectly architected audiobook. Whoever the director was for that, praise bless, please give us more.
I went into it and I was a little bit not suspect, but I was I don't know how this is going to go over. But it was executed so well, and I think it worked also because they had clearly crafted this story to be an audiobook, and so the scenes were really well put together, and they used almost like a voice memo style thing where there would be kind of a conversation.
It's all over phone calls. Half of this book they are on the phone together. Audio is just the best way to go about that.
Because the heroine is has her car, I think, is busted on the side of the road, and the hero is the person that she calls to help, and they end up just staying on the phone and talking the whole time.
Yeah, because it's really a customer service call. She's trying to she's launching a business, and so her website's not working, so she calls the customer service. She's been on hold with them for 3.5 hours or something, and then a guy, of course, with a great timbre baritone voice comes on the line, and she's like, wait, I gotta pull over. So she's in the middle of New York City. You hear all the honking and the noises. She pulls over to the side of the road, and her car's still running while she pulls open her laptop. They start to do customer service stuff, and the car dies. So she's stranded on the side of the road in New York City in a not great part of town. And he's like, I'm not getting off the phone until the tow truck guy is there. And then she's just a very charismatic person. So when the truck driver, the tow guy shows up, she is talking really friendly, and he can kind of hear her. And he's in his head, he's getting jealous because it's not him that she's talking to. It's just really, really cute. That's all I'll say. I don't want to spoil anymore, but it's so good.
Yeah, this one's on my list. My never-ending list of audiobooks.
Yeah.
I have way too many.
Through the Audible Plus program.
Yeah.
So RIP Audible Escape. We could do a whole episode dedicated.
I know.
Don't get me started on Audible's recent changes. Do not.
So irritating.
All of us romance readers are very, very sad.
Oh God.
Let's just say they gave me a ban on returns, and me and Audible are not in a good place right now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Charles, me and Audible are not on speaking terms right now, so.
I'm I feel I heard that Audible Escape wasn't great for authors. So on the one hand, if this means they're getting the stuff worse, then that's good. But as a reader, selfishly, I was how dare you? This is offensive.
Yes.
They should have just changed how they were paying their authors. I would have happily paid a couple dollars more a month to keep the service so that the authors were getting paid better. I wish they would have just talked to or sent out a survey to all of us who had the platform, just saying, hey, if we raised our prices so we could better pay the authors, would you be okay with that? And I would have said, yes, pay those authors.
Absolutely.
100%.
That's how I found KJ Charles books, because the Magpie Lord was on Audible Escape, and I was like, oh, I'll just try this out. And then like in one weekend, I listened to all 3. It was so good.
Yeah, there was a while there, like I think it was October before it was going to go away, because it went away November 1st, right?
Yes.
Like I listened from like book 5 current of the Side Changeling series that whole month.
Was
like
that
I
all
just
on Audible
I was
Escape?
listening to one a day,
Yeah,
back to
they were on
back,
Audible
back to back.
Doing? I'm so mad right now.
I know, like
But this
behind
means that you guys can
I'm
join
like,
the
I
Side
have to
Changeling
finish this before
readathon.
it goes away, and so I hurried.
Yeah,
And
like,
I've listened to the first 3 in the spin-off as well. I haven't listened to
Oh, the
Alpha Knight,
Trinity?
but I listened to the others.
Oh, okay.
Silver
Like-
Silence, whoever, like the male voice for Silver Silence.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Let's look it up.
Oh, it's so good. It might have just been the same narrator. I can't remember, but how the male voice comes across, like your hero, because he is
Good
the
freaking vibes.
Bear Shifter clan leader.
Oh.
He's the alpha.
It's still Angela
And
Doff.
he is
Same
a
gal.
marshmallow. He is the epitome of alpha mellow. I love him. It is my favorite Side Changeling book in existence, and I've read everything but Alpha Knight.
Wow.
I haven't read that one yet.
I want more with the Bear clan. I need more baby bear gangsters. I need them.
I'm the same, I like the Bear Clan, but I also want like more of like the marine like life, like the sea.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
No.
Okay.
Like the story on that one wasn't great for me, full disclosure, but I really liked exploring like that area, like where they were at. That was really cool, and there's a lot they could do with that. But the whole choice of story for that book was not my favorite. Full disclosure.
I think I have more people to invite to like the Side Changeling readathon live shows. Like, I feel you guys are like plugging all my readathons, like just like it's low key, which is good. But I think this is a good segue into our next topic: is why do we love audiobooks so much?
Starting with me again.
Yeah.
Oh no, anyone can jump in.
Okay.
Anyone can jump in.
For me, I just love the experience of being told a story. I think it kind of takes me back to my childhood. My dad was really creative with bedtime stories. Like he made up all sorts of random crack. Like it was amazing. Like there were stories about, my dad's a school teacher, I should say. So he would have stories about like the cafeteria at school and a giant Twinkie exploding. Like they were just really creative. And I don't know where my dad pulled it from, but man, it was hilarious. And I laughed so hard when my dad would tell me bedtime stories. And he doesn't really remember any of what he told me. So clearly he was just pulling it out of thin air to tell them
random.
Like a bunch of them sunk in for me, and I've like kept them like in my head all of these years. So sometimes just listening to a story told to you, especially when the narration is good, like it's just a pleasant experience. I don't love a lot of modern music. I'm kind of a music like snob, I guess you could
You're a
say.
throwback person?
What's your era?
Older songs?
What's your like era that you're like, this is when it was the greatest? Like these are the people.
Honestly, I am a 90s, early 2000s girl. Like I just am.
Okay.
Yeah.
All the Taylor Swift fans are angry.
My 90s would be my early 2000s, my angsty early 2000s.
Ooh,
and I'm a happy girl. Like, and you know, I'm a boy band girl. I'm Backstreet Boys forever. I mean, I went to a concert of theirs just a couple years ago. Like, I love them and I will forever, and that's okay. Like, I accepted that a long time ago. My mom went with me to that concert, by the way. We went together. I live in Utah. We drove to Vegas when they were in Vegas for my birthday and went to the concert. Like, that was my birthday. That was my birthday present.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Like,
that was a great
That is
birthday.
so cool.
And we actually listened to an audiobook the whole way down and the whole way back.
Ooh.
That's how you do it. That's how you do it.
My mom's not a big reader, but my dad is. And so it's just one of those things where audiobooks actually started coming into my point in my first marriage. I'm in my second, for those of you who don't know my story. But it's one of the only ways he would kind of allow me to read is to listen to audiobooks that he was interested in. It was a very toxic situation. It's why we're not married. But anyways, there was a lot more to it. But And then when I married Steve, when we first got married, we were commuting half an hour to and from work. So we would listen to audiobooks together in our commute, or if we didn't just feel like talking.
Mhm.
And he's the one who really got me like hooked on audiobooks like long term. And so we actually both have Audible accounts. So we're both getting a book a month. So we're getting like 2 into our household a month. Like it's worth it to us. We
That's
listen
smart.
to them. And what we do
Yeah.
is when one of us isn't really interested in anything new coming out, they just cancel their subscription for a while. And
And
you
then
know,
switch.
when they're interested again, they open it back up and we just kind of turn it on and off as we need. Because we have a huge
Great.
backlog between the two of us now. So
Yeah.
That's true.
That's true.
sorry, that was a
It's
long
so
tangent.
funny.
But I love them just because
No,
of the
it was good. It was good.
Good. It was funny as you were talking, I realized I guess I kind of also started out when I was young because like my family, we live in like 8 or 9, depending on how fast and who's driving, hours to where my grandparents live. And so for the holidays or any like long trips, we would always read books aloud. I don't know if you guys were ever into the Redwall series by Brian Jacques, but that was like our shit. That was the best. And usually it would actually be my mom would read aloud while we were driving. And I think you're right. It just is something that feels very kind of like cozy and you can kind of like snuggle in a little bit. And now, like I said, I'm a designer. And so I work on my computer all the time, but I'm just like drawing things for most of the time. And so it's so helpful to kind of have that, like, it's not even like necessarily like a running dialogue, but like I do listen to quite a bit of music. But I get bored of it pretty quickly unless I like kept like making a playlist, but then I would be spending all my time picking the music, which is a waste of time and they're not being productive. And so like having that kind of longer narrative thread is really, really keeps me going when I'm like doing like hours and hours of work.
Yeah, I definitely can see that. Like since I'm working from home more and more, and like even when I take my puppy out for walks, I'm like, okay, let's listen to an audiobook.
Yes.
Like I don't care what she's doing, like I'm listening to my audiobook. And it's perfect because like I can play with her, have my headphones on, and it's like I can do both at the same time.
honestly, like audiobooks are part of how I dealt with 2020, if I'm honest. Because what I would do is when I had to go to the grocery store, I would put in my earbuds, I would turn on an audiobook super loud, and it had to be one that I was excited to listen to. Because then I said, you can only listen to it if you actually go in the grocery store. So I had to like bribe myself to go to the grocery store. So I rewarded myself with a good audiobook rather than like buying something at the store because I'm trying to be a better adult and not just spend all my money on all the bookish things that I want to. But it's one of those things. It's like I have to reward myself somehow for doing something that's scary and hard for me right now. And going to the grocery store in a place where, you know, people don't think the pandemic is real, despite our numbers. Like,
being from
you gotta just find a way to mask up, it in, and run fast.
I'm in Washington right now, and like Washington's really good, but Idaho's like a 10-minute drive, and I like wanted to pick up a specific kind of chocolate cake from this great cafe in Idaho. And I get to the cafe, and there's like 20-30 people. No one is wearing masks. And they're just like,
oh wow.
And I was like,
yeah,
Utah's kind of the thing.
Half people don't think it's real, and the other half are like, y'all are crazy. And I'm part of the y'all are crazy crowd.
For me, I just love the convenience of being able to multitask because, you know, it's like, of course, like being a reader, I want to be reading all the time. So things would be neglected, like grocery shopping, housework, things like that. So it's just like, oh, I don't have to sacrifice, you know, my time that I want to spend reading to be able to do things that, you know, we have to adult, unfortunately. We have to adult.
Adulting.
Yeah, it's like, it's terrible. But so it's like, okay, I'll just, like, you know, Shae was saying, like, I just put on my, you know, Bluetooth headphones and I would just, you know, just be around the house, like cleaning and, you know, my audiobook's going. And then all of a sudden, no, the audiobook's done. Let's pick another audiobook and then just keep going. And then it's just like this convenience, the straight convenience of listening to audiobooks is really, you know, what draws me. And then I'm starting, you know, to pick out favorite narrators or look for, you know, those, like, you know, Shae was saying like earlier how, you know, she can recommend just narrators because you follow a bunch. So, and then I probably haven't listened to music like on the radio for like 2 years, like ever since I started listening to audiobooks. So like, I have no idea what like new music there is. So I'm totally like, I would listen to older music, but if I'm driving by myself, at least if my husband, I don't want to ignore him because, so like if I'm commuting to work, I have like probably about 25 minutes, 30 minutes, sometimes 40 minutes, depending on traffic. That's a good chunk of an audiobook or a book that you could. So.
No, I agree with you, Nicole. I definitely enjoy audiobooks because of my job. Part of my job is to sit and look in a microscope like for 3 or 4 hours at a stretch. And I enjoy that. And it takes just enough brain power that like I want to be doing something else. And so if I pick the right genre of audiobook, it sort of melds perfectly. If it's too exciting, then I'm like, oh my gosh, she did what? And then I'm like, oh, I got to go back to the screening. But then if it's too dull, then I'm like, I'm starting to fall asleep. So I fell in love with audiobooks because of my job gives me that availability to listen and do my work. But I definitely started young. I remember listening to Harry Potter on my Walkman. And I even like was gifted, like the library had a bunch of sales.
And if that doesn't date us, I don't know what will.
Yeah. So I remember listening. I had a bunch of cassette tapes of audios of Harry Potter and a couple other like kids books. So I started young, but like right now it's because I get to listen to them at work.
I just realized I totally did too. I had soccer and I played in Idaho because I didn't have a club team in Washington. And like I said, it's like 10, 15 minutes. It depends on how long you're going. Anyways, but I would carpool with this other girl from Pullman and we would listen to audiobooks. And the one that I remember the most was Dealing with Dragons by Patricia C. Reed. It was about a princess named Cimarine. And it was so good. And I listened to it again last year.
Like audiobooks that are so random. I still remember the first time I did a smutty romance audiobook. I was like, what did they just say? Like, is this really happening? Because I didn't know how smutty the book was going to be. But it's a Christine Feehan, so clearly they went there. Let's be real here. And I mean, I'm a Christine Feehan stan these days, so like it's just what sealed the deal for me. And it was like, wow, this is descriptive, and there are sound effects for her happiness, and yes.
What series was this?
Did you say sound effects?
I read my first Christine Feehan this year for the PNR readathon, which Charles also did. I bring Charles up yet again. I got an OG copy of Dark Prince with like the clinched cover.
Oh yeah, I have the audio of that.
The old Carpathian books are like, let's be real. Yeah. The newer ones, they're more mellow, and so I stand the more recent ones. Like a good entry point, if you're going to start with the more recent ones, is Dark Carousel, because that kind of is the first story in like the newer arc where they're in a different part that they hadn't really explored yet. So that would be your entry point for the later ones that aren't so
that's good to know.
I guess we'll say.
I mean, the writing was super compelling. It just, I could tell that it was one of the like first paranormal books written.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
I remember Dark Prince. There are problems with Dark Prince.
There's like problems with all romance.
First
story.
Yeah.
I'm just like, so the first audiobook was the third book in that series for me, Dark Gold.
Okay.
And honestly, it's still one of my favorite Carpathian books. And I think it's just because I listened to the audio and the narrators were fantastic. So yeah.
Oh, okay, that's cool. Like I have her Leopard, Wild Rain.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I got that from the library. Just like, okay, let's just try this one. Do I think I'm gonna read it? Maybe. It's like
I like the Leopard series.
It's like I'm like so skittish with my reading. So like I read like 5 pages of this, and then I read 5 pages of that, and then I like listen to an hour over here, and then I listen to an hour over here, and then somehow books get finished. But for me, at least, I wasn't a big reader until maybe like 2 or 3 years ago. Like I mostly read for school, like all the classics. And I actually had a teacher who like taught us how to like basically get to the like main point of every book. So I can like, if I'm reading a book physically, I'm just skimming, and then I maybe might pause for dialogue. But I'm really just kind of like, okay, that's important. Okay, that's important. So I wasn't really enjoying it. I was like thinking like, okay, someone asked me a question.
So you weren't retaining it and enjoying it. Yeah.
Yeah, I knew enough to like take a test. I could tell you like, oh, this happened in this book and this. But if you ask me like any like the little details, I'm like, okay, inner monologue, don't care. Okay, don't care. Okay, someone died. Okay, good. Okay, who did this? Okay, we're a little bit confused. Let's go back and rewind. So when I discover audio, because I remember before like Audible started to get big, Audible books were like really expensive.
Yeah.
Like if you got like the CDs, I think like CDs were like $30 or something for like a set of 8 CDs. So it's like really
or
like
more depending.
Yeah, or more. And like you couldn't speed it up, so like you just like had to listen to like 16 hours if the book was that long of one book. Like with like your little CD player.
Commitment.
With like your little CD player. So like once Audible started getting like bigger and I tried it a little bit, I was like, okay, I like this. Like I'm actually like enjoying the story more. I'm absorbing it a lot better.
Yeah. Yes.
And from there it just like kind of went on and just like my love of audiobooks just grew from there. I think especially like if you want to talk romance, like the inner dialogue. Like when the characters are just like, oh, I like him, but I don't like him. But then I saw him like they have a lot of that heavy internal monologue and a lot of banter. It works so much better in audio than if you're actually reading it, because then you get the auditor's like take on the lines that he's lines that he or she is delivering. I just think for me personally, like audiobooks, like really, especially if they're done well, they really like they can make like a bad book into like a really, really good book, or like The Hate You Give by Bami Turpin. Like I never cried during, or like The Help by Catherine Stockett. Like I was like bawling those books because the narrator did such a good job of just conveying. It wasn't like she was just reading the book. She was actually performing the book. And I think that's what the big positive of audiobooks are. It's a performance of the
Oh yeah, I was sobbing listening to my audiobook today. Like I even had to like pause it and go downstairs and say, "Husband, I need a hug." My book was sad. I need a hug.
I love that.
And
I think that a lot of readers
just hugged me.
I think that most readers have decent imaginations that they are able to translate what they're reading into a picture in their head, or really emotive, intuitive people, maybe a little bit more than like non-readers. That's maybe too generic and too generalizing. But I think that performance level that happens in an audiobook helps bring and convey that emotion even stronger than it might be just reading it. And so I think that like, especially, I think Jacqueline was saying earlier, and you guys just mentioned sound effects. I think that audiobooks are starting to be more performative. I listened to the Ruth Bader Ginsburg her biography, My Own Words, and there were excerpts of her speeches. It was like not just here's her speech typed out. It was somebody, it was a recording of her speaking. Her speech was recorded. Or there was an opera that someone composed like for her and one of the other judges, and like there was a snippet of the opera. And so there was all these elements that really worked well in the audio that I would have just read if I was reading the physical book.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Speaks to something I've recognized, and also something that Charles said, is that like for me, I read pretty quickly, and part of it's probably because I'm skimming, because I'm like, I gotta know what's happening next. And so I like kind of read at this breakneck pace to just like get to the end because I want to know. But with an audiobook, like you can fast forward, but to a certain extent, you're gonna hit some redundancies with that, like the times like 1.5 times 2. And like with an audiobook, you really kind of have to slow down. And like I said, I listen to the Immortals After Dark series at least once a year because they're so good. And like I remember I read them before, like, oh gosh, in January. And then I was listening to them this fall, and there would be like little details that I like never even picked up on when I was reading them. And then as I was listening, I was like, oh my gosh, the origami shapes that Nyx is folding tell the entire story of this book on like chapter 2, and I like didn't even catch it when I was reading, but as I'm listening, like there's so much more that's going on that as I like kind of sit in the text a little bit more, I pick up on those. Or even sorry, not to geek out about Immortals After Dark.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
When I was listening to Dark Needs at Night's Edge, which is Conrad and Naomi, one of my faves, there's a moment, I think on the book it's page 84, where it switches from present tense to past tense, because like as the hero's with the heroine, he like becomes kind of more grounded, and like a lot of the like voices in his head like kind of calm. And there's this moment where it's like he sees or he felt. And it's an audiobook. I was like, oh my God, what?
You felt those words.
It was so good.
But that's a really interesting, just bring it like back to what Charles said about skimming. Like I find when I am physically reading a book, I'm doing the same thing. I'm skimming, I'm getting like, Charles said, getting to that dialogue or getting to, that, the important bits, kind of thing. But it's just like with the audiobook, you're listening, like you have to listen, the narrator's not skimming it for you, so you're listening to the whole thing. So you're retaining more. That's actually a really good point. Like I never really even thought of that, it's just something that I do when I physically read. Cause I'm just like, yep.
That's one thing I've started doing recently is when I'm in like a dense fantasy book, what I'll do, I'll read it with my eyes and listen. So you're like getting everything that's happening sinking in. And so that's what I was listening to today. I was in the last part of Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson. And y'all know Stormlight Archive books, they're big, they're chunky,
books are thick.
And they'll gut you. And I cried with this audiobook like 4 different times. Because the impact was so much doing both audio and reading it. So I'm sitting there reading it, crying and tabbing, and then listening to it and just bawling harder because the narration is so well done and it just is so powerful. So when I'm getting a book that I'm feeling like bogged down by sometimes, I'll see if I can get access to the audiobook pretty easily. And then I'll listen and read at the same time because it'll kind of get through that bog because it'll help things sink in a little better usually. As long as the narration's good. Like a narrator can seriously make or break a book for me. So like
that is true.
I am particular with my narrators. Like not all narrators are created equal. Like I'm finicky. It's like I don't know.
It's like and Shae, like it's funny you say that because I'm like the exact opposite. When I read,
give it all to me.
No, like when I read, like if I'm reading and listening, I find that I can skim faster, like even at the highest speed. So I'm like, I'm already like halfway through like this chapter. Come on, like,
because you want the narrator to speed up.
Because like for some things, like I just don't care when I'm reading like descriptions of buildings, like any like he walked into the store and like describing all the objects. I'm like, this is not going to like affect my understanding of the story. I'm like, where's the point? Like, get to the point. I'm sorry, like I'm an impatient reader.
No, that's why I primarily do it with like fantasies, because you usually have obscure things you need the descriptions for to understand how they work.
Yeah.
Especially like magic systems as dense as Brandon Sanderson's, let's be real. Like some of them you almost need it to come from both places to truly understand it. But other times I find myself like drifting towards either physically reading or audio listening, depending on what's going on. Because sometimes
helps with like names in fantasy.
Yeah.
Oh, that's super helpful.
Pronunciation of
that's
terms.
So helpful.
Well, especially with like names like Brandon Sanderson likes to use. There's so many that are like obscure, and you're like, how would you even pronounce this? Like Jasna starts with a J, and people are like, how do you say this? Jasna? Like,
Josna?
See, I wouldn't listen, and then I would think of the wrong name in my head, and then I would say it to another human person, and they'd be like, excuse me?
Yeah.
Well, who are you talking about? It's actually pronounced in
what?
Right. Well, I have that
say the main character
names all the time with my manga, so it's like, y'all, I'm white AF and American. I'm sorry, I try though.
But I think that is another good segue to our final topic. We already been talking about some audiobooks that we absolutely love, but are there any other audiobooks that you guys are currently listening to that you just have to tell people that they have to go listen? It could be a whole series, it could be a narrator, whatever floats your boat.
Well, I'm a narrator recommender. Like that's just what I do. So if you want fantasy, Michael Kramer, Kate Redding, those are the two that you really want. They usually narrate as a duo. Michael Kramer will do stuff on his own, and everything that he's done on his own has also been really, really good. He primarily does epic fantasy. So if you're a fantasy listener, Michael Kramer and Kate Redding are where it's at. Like, they're even doing their own little like side project where they're helping people who like indie publish their own, that they'll narrate for them to help give them the promo that they need and stuff, because their names are so well known. I had mentioned when we were talking before, I really love Derek Perkins. He does the Victorian Rebel series by Kerrigan Byrne. So good. Definitely love their narration. And then there's one other I want to recommend. I gotta get to one of the books in the series. I've read so many. Oh my gosh, my list is so long. Where is it? Oh, for the love, really?
I started putting like my books in collections on my Audible app just to like sort everything.
I really should.
I really should, but like I have way too many that it's just like it.
Like it just
it's like a whole task. You gotta take an afternoon.
It's like 500
found
plus
it.
now.
Hey, her name is Gabra Zachman. She does like the Poison Steady series and anything by Maria V. Snyder.
Okay,
I really like her narrations a lot. So those would be like my top recommendations.
Okay.
So the two that I'm going to be listening to shortly, they're like almost in my immediate TBR. It's going to be in the next couple of weeks. Is going to be A Sky Beyond the Storm, and then also. And also We Free the Stars, which are the female narrator. It's multiple perspectives, but the female narrator is Fiona Hardingham, and she is so good. Yeah, she's also narrated the Conqueror Saga by Kirsten White, the And I Darken. So she is so good, especially with like very strong, powerful female characters. She has like this like edge in her voice, like when she delivers the lines, and I'm just like, so badass. I love it. but yeah, those two are.
I need to pick up We Free the Stars. I loved the first book.
I love it. So good.
I have already talked about my love of Immortals After Dark and Robert Petkoff's narration. So like that to the side. I just finished a audio reread of the Hidden Legacy series by Ilona Andrews. And the first three are narrated by Renee Rodman. And then the last three, just two thus far. I think Ruby, whatever the next word is coming out in 2022. But those are narrated by Emily Rankin. And it's like perfect urban fantasy. I would say urban fantasy. Yeah. But like also the romance element is always just like exquisitely done. And I also really like that the first three books and the second three books are two different sisters, and they feel like very much like different people, but still like different people who are related and grew up in the same place. And it's so good. The hero of the second book is Italian. Incredible.
Nice. My two recommendations are, I've actually only ever listened to the Outlander books. I've never actually read them. At one point I had to pick one up because I was looking for a specific like scene, and I was like, the spellings are not what they sound like. Let me tell you that. And so Davina Porter. Davina Porter does a really great narrating the whole Outlander series. She does a great Scottish accent. I kind of just swoon a little bit at the Scottish accent. So I would recommend Outlander on audio. And one of my other favorite series from my youth is the His Dark Materials trilogy by Philip Pullman, the Golden Compass, Subtle Knight. Those audiobooks are actually a full cast, but Philip Pullman does the like narration part, anytime where someone's not speaking. And so they have a full cast for the voices, but then they have the author giving, his words to
as the narrator.
That's so cool.
I love
he's British.
So cool. That's so cool. Oh, and then I guess I should give mine.
Yes, you should.
I should have thought of this beforehand, but I didn't. But I'm trying to think of. I'm trying to think of something that people wouldn't expect for me to say. So if I mention Joanna Shupe, everyone goes like, okay, we already know.
We know.
We already know his love of the Uptown Girl series, so like can't do that. I will do a YA and a middle grade.
Ooh, okay.
So I recommend Darius the Great is Not Okay and Darius the Great Deserves Better by Adib Khorram. It's about a Persian American teenager who suffers from clinical depression and is gay. His father has depression too. And it's just about, in the first book, it's him kind of going back to Persia for the first time, meeting his mother's family, and kind of like dealing with his relationship with his father. And in the second book, if you really like the show Sex Education on Netflix, he has a love triangle with two other guys. And like this, it's a major vibe. Like I like messaged the author, I'm like, this is like a major, like I'm getting major vibes. Like you had to have thought of this while you were writing this book, but he said no. But like those are like, he's like one of my favorite YA authors. He's like up there with like Angie Thomas, Nick Stone, like all those like my golden YA authors. And then for middle grade, I'm actually gonna go back for like a really, I think it's an old title, but a lot of people haven't read it who are fans of middle grade. It's Wonder by R.J. Palacio, and then there's actually a companion of like 3 separate stories from other characters in the book. And I never read a book where like every time I read it, I cry. Then I watch the movie, I cry, because it's just so well written. And it doesn't feel like middle grade. It doesn't feel. It feels, and then you read the side stories from like one is from a bully in the first book, and it's just so amazing. Like watching like how parents like it's just a really great middle grade, and it's like it's no wonder why it like is always on the New York Times of like Harry Potter and everything. Is such a phenomenal book, not just for young kids but like for all ages. And the movie is absolutely fantastic. The audio for it's really good as well. So those are my 2 recommendations.
Nice.
Okay.
I'm good.
Okay, so that is the end of our episode. Let us know down in the comment section down below why you love audiobooks and why do you think audiobooks are important. And like we said earlier in the video, everyone's social media links and YouTube channels, Instagrams, and everything will all be down in the description box down below. I'm obsessed with all these, with everyone's Instagram. I follow them all. I think I do. I follow everyone on YouTube. I should. If I don't, you guys can call me out down in the comment section down below. You know, this is Shae's channel. You feel free to call me out.
I'm gonna check and I'm gonna call you out.
Just like when we come back from another video, we're just like, where's Jacqueline? Like Charles blocked her from the live. But yes, thank you guys so much for watching. Go subscribe and go follow everyone. And yeah, we'll come back with you guys for another episode. Bye.